Welcome to The Unusual History of Everything, the podcast that uncovers the unusual history of everything around us. I'm Karen Lisi.
And I'm Melanie Dellis. On this episode, we dig up the roots of the oldest family tree discovered so far and get a glimpse into the family structure of Neolithic people.
Being interested in where your ancestors come from is not a new thing. People all over the world have long and varied history of trying to find their roots to understand who they are. Millions of people have given their DNA to companies like Ancestry.com and 23andMe in the hopes of discovering where they belong and who they're connected with. But even before modern times, tracing one's lineage was a thing. People in the colonial era needed to know their pedigree, which would secure their place in the British Empire. And proving your family's background became important for Anglo-Saxons during a time of immigration and the emancipation of slaves.
It was during the Middle Ages that the nobility adopted the tree as a symbol of family lineage, with its roots planted firmly in the ground and its many branches and leaves symbolizing the different marriage lines and children. By the 18th century, the term family tree was commonplace, and the image of the tree changed its look over and over. But even before this, ancient civilizations used the tree as a symbol for life, death, and immortality.
We are probably all familiar with the symbol of the tree of life, or world tree. They're popular across almost all spiritual traditions. The world tree is depicted as the earth structured around a tree, whose branches support the planet and whose roots reach down to the underworld. The tree of life is usually seen as the source of all life and immortality, and as its roots reaching down and the branches reaching up, with or without leaves. Each culture has its own way of depicting these tree symbols, and each is beautiful.
In the Bible, Genesis talks about the tree of life in the Garden of Eden, along with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They help to tell the story and history of mankind. In Islam, there is the tree of immortality, which is also placed in the Garden of Eden. However, in the Islamic version, if Adam and Eve eat from it, they will turn into angels. Throughout the Quran, trees appear as various symbols of good and bad ideas. In Judaism, the tree of life appears in Adam and Eve's story, but is also used as a metaphor for the Torah and is a common name for synagogues and Jewish schools.
The indigenous peoples of America have a strong spiritual connection with trees, and some believe trees can communicate with each other and are aware of their surroundings. Scientifically, this is actually true. If you look at what's under the ground, you will see an intricate network of fungal organisms that connect everything and help the forest ecosystem thrive. One network, the mycorrhizal network, transfers water, nutrients, and information between trees.
The mycorrhizal network is created by a root-like structure of fungus inside soil called mycelium. Mycelium has tiny threads that bore into tree roots and grow into mycorrhizal networks. Through these networks, the trees give each other whatever is needed, literally, by communicating with each other. And in exchange, the fungi get to keep some... Every time I say fungi, I'm like, hey, I'm a fungi. Remember that meme?
Yes,
Sorry.
I do.
And in exchange, the fungi get to keep some carbon and sugars from the trees that they need.
Yes, and I've read that older trees that have roots that go deeper into the soil have access to more or different nutrients and will use the networks to help other trees that are having problems. Researchers have discovered that chemical signals are sent through the mycorrhizal networks by the trees, almost like they're talking to each other. And in doing this, the trees know which ones are in distress and what they need in order to get better. However, in order for them to communicate with each other, they have to share the same mycorrhizal network.
Interestingly, those same chemical signals protect the trees from threats above ground. For example, if the tree is being attacked by an invasive insect, it sends out distress signals and is given whatever it needs to produce chemicals that are harmful to the insect or that will attract the insect's natural predator. It's very reminiscent of M. Night Shyamalan, whatever his name is. Shyamalan. Remember that 2008 movie, The Happening?
Oh,
Did you ever see that?
Yes, I did.
So that's the one where some sort of like airborne contagion that's carried in the wind causes people to commit suicide, right? Mm-hmm. So they're all running. Was Marky Mark in that movie?
Oh my God, I don't remember. It's been so long.
I know, it's been a while. I can't remember who it was.
2008.
I know, I think it was Marky Mark. Mark Wahlberg. But he's running like with his family, I think.
I think it
and they
is
have to be super quiet and not
Yes.
like irritate the trees and bushes, because it's like it kind of implied that the movie made it seem like the trees were releasing some sort of chemical that blew in the wind and caused the deaths of mankind.
Yeah, because it was considered like mankind was like their true predator or something.
Right,
like that.
exactly. And what's creepy is that it sounds like it's possible, and that's one of the reasons I'm always nice to plants and trees. And I tell my kids the same thing. I'm like, just don't pull its leaves, don't carve into its trunk. Like, you just never know.
I know. I always think of The Giving Tree. Did you ever read that book?
Yeah.
I actually think that it's a beautiful book, but like the ending is not what I want, because I'm like, at the end, the person just does not appreciate the tree until it's too late. And I'm like, seriously? The tree gave you everything.
You have to appreciate it. And now that you know that it can produce chemicals that can get rid of its predators.
Yeah, we should be nice.
Yeah. I mean, like, if all the trees in their network are helping them to, get these nutrients to produce the chemicals it needs to kill whatever's above ground and threatening them, just be nice.
Yeah. Well, it definitely makes you understand why the tree symbol has been connected, right? And connected not only to themselves, right, but also spiritually and to family. So getting back to family trees, researchers believe that they have found the oldest one in Britain. For thousands of years, people have been very concerned with showing what family they belong to in life as well as in death. In 2021, DNA analysis of bones and teeth excavated from a British Neolithic tomb in the village of Hazelton in the Cotswolds has uncovered the kinship structure of the people in that area and is to date the oldest quote-unquote family tree ever discovered.
The study is a collaboration between archaeologists from universities in Newcastle, Central Lancashire, Exeter, and York, geneticists from Harvard University, the University of Vienna, and the University of the Basque Country, and is published in the journal Nature. The tomb, called Hazelton North Long Cairn, is 5,700 years old and is an early Neolithic chambered long cairn of the Cotswold Severn Group, which was excavated between 1979 and 1982 after plowing damaged it. It was shaped like a trapezoid with two L-shaped chambers near the center that had entryways from opposite sides of the tomb. The main chamber is now in the Corinium Museum in Gloucestershire, England.
Cairns, by the way, are man-made piles of stone that are still seen today. In this case, they are Neolithic or early Bronze Age burials that were often covered by mounds of dirt or rock. Inside the Hazelton North Long Cairn were bones of 35 people from 5 generations of one family. The discovery is significant because it sheds light on how Britain's first farmers lived, died, and thought about family.
Inside the tomb's two L-shaped chambers, the men were found to be generally buried with their father and brothers, but the choice of whether to be buried in the north or south chamber depended on the first-generation woman that they were descended from, which implies the importance of these first women in this community. According to co-author of the study, Professor David Reich of Harvard Medical School, 4 women were buried with all of their children and their kids all the way up to the 5th generation. 2 women in the south chamber, the other 2 in the north. Oh, and all 4 women had the children with the same man.
Although the cairn has young daughters who died in childhood, there are no adult daughters, which suggests that they were buried with their husbands or male partners with whom they had children. Another interesting find was that some young males who had no bloodline connection to the women were buried with them instead of their biological fathers, suggesting that they could have been stepsons.
Aww.
There's a lot more information that they're kind of working on through this particular study of families, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about it soon.
Yeah.
What about your family, Melanie? How far back can you go?
Not very far. Not very far at all.
Really?
Yeah, because in Sicily and in Crete and Sparta, where my family is from, they didn't really keep very good records, and there were a lot of fires and wars and stuff, and everything was just lost and stuff like that. So the only reason I know that I can go back thousands and thousands of years is because I sent my Ancestry DNA analysis. Like they give it to you. I don't know what that's called. Like they give you your DNA, whatever.
DNA profile.
They give you your DNA profile and you can upload it to this one site that uses archaeological discoveries from
that's right.
hundreds of thousands of years that all the mummies that they've discovered and everything. And they can compare it to see if you're related to any. And through through that, I found that my mom and dad and I were all related to a few Egyptian mummies, a few Minoan mummies they found, and my kids were related to revolutionary soldiers and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. But that's like the only way that I would have known about that. There's no records.
Oh.
No written records anymore, really.
Oh, okay.
What about you?
My written records, gosh, it depends on where you're talking about, but they go pretty far back in England for...
They were much better record keepers in that part of Europe.
Well, a lot of it has to do with like church records.
Yeah.
You know, if you kept the church records in terms of like births, deaths, and marriages, I mean, that gives you a lot more information than nothing. And especially if they were like in some of the same places. So we can go back pretty far back, several hundred years at least. We know all of the family that's here in the U.S., like once they came over. But I don't know, before that, we can go pretty far back too. I don't know. I haven't really delved all the way into how many generations, but I know a lot of generations in mine. And then I was also working on my husband's too. And his
Yeah, well, we did the DNA of you guys in a couple of our podcasts, like early podcasts.
And it's funny because it's like it's changed over time. And now if you still have your DNA on Ancestry, there's a new beta that they're working on where they can look at the DNA that you get specifically from each one of your parents.
I know. I saw that literally yesterday. I saw that.
It was interesting because the stuff that I got from my dad was very similar than the stuff that I got from my mom. And I thought that was really interesting because I know that in terms of my dad's family's history and my mom's history, they're not from the same places, but they were in similar places throughout history. And my mom's family and my dad's family go back several hundred years. So in terms of, they actually came over potentially on like the same boat, but then didn't have any relationship to each other until like my parents, which I thought was really weird.
That is cool.
So there's a lot going on there with each and every family if you really think about it. So yeah, it's fun stuff.
One of the many reasons why everybody should kind of check it out for themselves. Yeah. It's interesting.
It's got some good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow the Unusual History of Everything podcast on Instagram at the Unusual History of Everything and on Facebook at the Unusual History of Everything podcast. And find our show notes on www.musecuratorial.com. The Unusual History of Everything is written, produced, and directed by Melanie Dellis and Karen Lacey.
New episodes air every Tuesday on all podcast outlets. Be sure to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. You can also see photos from our episodes and more on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Melanie Dellis.
And I'm Karen Lacey, your host for the Unusual History of Everything.